It's clear that the success of any wrestling match depends heavily on the opponents in the ring, but when ego, grudges, or personal issues take over mid-match, chaos is inevitable. With that in mind, let's look at real moments when WWE wrestlers went out of their way to sabotage their own matches. Fans sometimes enjoy the complete domination of a well-executed squash match. Just think of Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg at Survivor Series. A clash that lasted less than 2 minutes, yet remains one of the most talked about matches of the last decade. These moments work because both opponents are fully coordinated, but history has also proven that one performer can completely throw the script out the window. Nothing showed this better than WrestleMania 12. After the Ultimate Warrior returned to WWE in 1996 following a 4-year absence, Vince McMahon wanted to bring him back as the unstoppable force he had been in the late 80s. And the job of making him look strong was given to a 26-year-old, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The original plan was for Helmsley to get some offense in while Warrior still looked dominant in the end, but what actually happened was completely different. After marching to the ring with his trademark intensity, Warrior no-sold all of Triple H's offense. Even Helmsley's finisher, the pedigree, had no effect as Warrior popped right back up as if nothing had happened, leaving the young star looking weak and foolish. Less than 2 minutes later, Warrior hit his signature shoulder tackles, a gorilla press slam, and the Warrior splashed to win the match in just 99 seconds. Years later, Jim Cornette revealed that Warrior refused to cooperate with Triple H and dictated the match entirely on his own terms. Backstage, Vince McMahon was reportedly furious, realizing Warrior's actions were driven by his notorious ego. The fallout lingered for years, with Triple H later calling Warrior the most unprofessional wrestler he ever worked with. This WrestleMania 12 match set the tone for Warrior's chaotic 1996 run, which quickly fell apart due to missed appearances, creative disputes, and erratic behavior, leading to his departure after just 4 months. If the Warrior-Helmsley match was an example of ego ruining a bout, then Brock Lesnar versus Dean Ambrose was a case of indifference killing one. Their no-holds-barred street fight at WrestleMania 32 had been hyped for weeks, with Ambrose promoting it as an all-out war and even receiving weapons from hardcore legends Mick Foley and Terry Funk to use against Lesnar. But when the bell rang, none of that played out. The match fell flat because Lesnar clearly wasn't interested in putting in the effort. He refused to sell for Ambrose, had no interest in the brutal back and forth that was promised, and instead treated the whole thing like a light workout. After a series of suplexes, a few scattered chair shots, and almost no suspense, Lesnar ended the match with an F5 on a pile of chairs, leaving fans disappointed and underwhelmed. In interviews after the match, Dean Ambrose revealed that no one, including Brock Lesnar, seemed to care about their WrestleMania 30 bout. Every idea Ambrose pitched, from creative weapon spots to intense sequences, was rejected. He said Brock showed up unmotivated and treated the whole thing like just another payday, later even calling Lesnar a lazy worker. In response, Paul Heyman defended Brock, saying, "Anybody who thinks Brock Lesnar is lazy isn't looking at the facts. Lazy doesn't win an NCAA heavyweight championship. Lazy doesn't knock out Randy Couture in his 4th MMA fight. Lazy doesn't become UFC heavyweight champion." On the opposite end of the spectrum, there have been matches where both opponents intentionally turned things into a disaster from the start. One night at a live event, Owen Hart and Mick Foley were scheduled to wrestle when they learned that wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer was in attendance. Instead of trying to impress him, they decided to do the opposite and aim to get a negative star rating by putting on the worst match possible. While no video footage exists, both Foley in his first book and Meltzer during a 2019 appearance on Talk Is Jericho shared detailed accounts of what happened. The match quickly turned into a parody, with Owen and Foley overselling every move and acting like even the simplest spots were devastating. At one point, they started using giant bags of popcorn as weapons. Meltzer recalled, "I didn't know they were doing this, but they were hitting each other with bags of popcorn and selling it like it was the most painful thing ever. It was absurd, but the crowd loved it." To make it even more ridiculous, Stone Cold Steve Austin was the special enforcer at ringside, and Foley wrote that Austin was laughing so hard he had to bury his face in his arms to hide it. When they got to the back, Austin reportedly told them it was the worst match he had ever seen. Ironically, despite their best efforts, Owen and Foley failed at their goal because Meltzer later explained that the match wasn't bad in the traditional sense, it was just pure comedy done by two very talented wrestlers. Speaking of talent, Bret Hart's reputation as one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time is legendary, but it also came with complicated relationships with his peers. The Hitman was never afraid to call out opponents he felt didn't meet his standards, and one of his most famous examples came during the very night he won the WWE Championship for the first time. In October 1992, Hart was handpicked to dethrone Ric Flair, the Nature Boy. For most wrestlers, winning their first world title would be remembered as a flawless crowning moment. But Bret Hart, being Bret, later admitted he felt Ric Flair didn't do enough in their match. Hart claimed Flair's performance was underwhelming, pointing out that he struggled with a hand injury mid-match and ultimately failed to make the bout feel like the historic title change it was supposed to be. He even suggested Flair might have been sabotaging their matches and botching finishes, whether intentionally or not. Bret didn't stop there. He later criticized Flair for being too repetitive, saying he worked the same match every night and relied too much on stiff chops. Flair, never one to hold back, fired back in shoot interviews, dismissing Bret's power and charisma and accusing him of being stuck in his own formula. What followed was years of public jabs, with both legends questioning each other's legacy. To be fair, Flair has admitted he wasn't at his best that night, citing personal struggles at the time. In hindsight, even when two of the greatest wrestlers of all time share a ring, the result isn't always magic, it can just be pure conflict. When Brock Lesnar returned to WWE in 2012 after 8 years away, it was a massive moment. His first feud with John Cena was meant to re-establish him as an unstoppable beast, and their clash at Extreme Rules delivered exactly that. Within the opening minute, Cena was legitimately busted open, and the rest of the bout played out like a Uffs-inspired beatdown. For most of the match, it looked like Cena was being mauled, which was exactly Lesnar's vision to make his comeback feel like a statement and prove he was operating on an entirely different level. However, things didn't end the way Brock wanted. In the closing moments, Cena made a dramatic comeback, used his steel chain as a weapon, and hit an attitude adjustment on the steel steps to score a shocking win. Behind the scenes, reports from Mike Johnson and others claimed Brock had a full-blown tantrum after the match. He believed Cena had gone into business for himself by refusing to stay down and then cutting an unplanned promo after the bell. Instead of being stretchered out to sell Lesnar's dominance, Cena told the crowd that his boss might be upset with him for saying this, but he might be taking time off due to his injured arm. That unscripted promo completely undercut the aura Brock had spent 20 minutes building. And while Cena did sell the damage the next night on Raw with his arm in a sling, the controversy left Lesnar furious about how his big return had been handled. But as history shows, Brock Lesnar doesn't lose arguments for long. Just 2 years later at SummerSlam 2014, he finally got the match he wanted against John Cena, a brutal, one-sided demolition that cemented his dominance. Though Randy Orton is a well-respected veteran today, it's no secret that he once had a reputation for letting his ego get in the way of business. One of the most infamous examples came during his feud with Kofi Kingston in 2009. Their tension dated back to a time when Kingston was on the rise and seemed ready to break into the main event scene, only for his push to suddenly come to a halt. The incident that derailed his momentum happened on an episode of Raw during a triple threat match with Kingston, Cena, and Orton. Near the end, Kofi was supposed to take a punt kick from Orton, but he seemingly forgot the planned finish and kept getting back up after being knocked down, thinking the ending involved an RKO instead. Frustrated by the mix-up, Orton hit him with a vicious RKO and shouted "stupid" loud enough for cameras to pick up. Even though Orton technically won the match, his outburst exposed his temper and drained the bout of its drama. As one of the most influential stars at the time, Orton allegedly played a part in halting Kingston's push. In the following weeks, Kofi's TV time was cut, and he was booked to lose more often, killing the momentum he had built just as he was on the cusp of main event status. For years, both Kingston and Orton were said to hold resentment toward each other, with Kofi believing Orton's actions cost him valuable years of his career. And this wasn't the only time Orton's temper changed the course of someone's career. Just look at Mr. Kennedy. When Kennedy debuted in 2005, he was seen as one of WWE's fastest rising stars, defeating The Undertaker in his first year and racking up wins over former champions like Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. But just as his career was taking off, a series of injuries started to slow him down. His biggest blow came after winning the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 23, only to lose it to Edge because of a sudden injury. After several setbacks, Kennedy returned in 2009 for what looked like a fresh start, but only 4 days after his comeback, WWE abruptly fired him. At the time, fans were left confused because WWE gave no clear explanation. Years later, in 2016, Kennedy revealed that Randy Orton and John Cena were behind his firing. The breaking point came during his return match, a multi-man tag on Raw, where Kennedy delivered a suplex to Orton. Orton believed he was dropped dangerously on his neck and, already distrustful of Kennedy, shut him down in the ring, refusing to sell his moves and cutting off all his offense. Backstage, Orton allegedly went straight to management and labeled Kennedy unsafe to work with. That was all Vince McMahon needed to hear before firing him just days later, officially ending Kennedy's WWE career. And that was the thing about Randy Orton during that period. One flash of his temper could change everything. For Kofi, it stalled his rise for years. For Kennedy, it ended his WWE run entirely. If there's one match that perfectly showed how a squash can go completely off the rails when it drags on too long, it was Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 26. This match was billed as the ultimate payoff to over a decade of bad blood stemming from the infamous Montreal Screwjob, when Vince McMahon double-crossed Bret in front of the entire world. That betrayal poisoned their relationship for years, and fans were expecting a short, satisfying showdown where Bret finally got his revenge. Instead, what they got was an overly long, overbooked spectacle. Vince tried stacking the deck by involving the Hart family, only for them to turn on him and side with Bret. From there, the match turned into a slow and methodical beating that lacked any real drama or emotional closure. Bret, still dealing with health issues after his stroke and unwilling to risk serious injury, refused to take bumps or sell for Vince. The entire bout became a one-sided assault, with Bret repeatedly hitting Vince with chair shots in a sequence that dragged on awkwardly and tested the crowd's patience. Many fans and critics